Namaste and welcome to this webinar here on the Network 18 digital platform. And this is as part of Sanjeevani, our campaign to spread vaccine awareness. And today, this Sanjeevani effort would not have been possible here at Network 18 without our partners, Federal Bank, our health partners, Apollo 24/7, and of course, our NGO partners, United Way Mumbai. And so profuse thanks to all at the top itself, and of course, heartiest congratulations to all of us as a country for achieving 1 billion doses, 1 to 1 billion in 279 days. What a journey it has been for us. And let me quickly bring in our guests and our speakers here on this very special effort. Dr. Anupam Sibal, Group Medical Director, Apollo Hospitals. Dr. Jinesh Shah, Consultant Child and Adult Psychiatrist, Apollo Hospitals. And Dr. Onika Mehrotra, Director, Kalka Group of Institutions. So, namaste to all of you, and thank you very, very much. And first up, heartiest congratulations. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak to all of you at a time when we have, as a collective, as a nation, shown the world that what you think is impossible is possible for us as a country. So what next? The next is, of course, 200 crore doses, everybody getting second doses. But more importantly, can our children finally go back to school? I know a lot of places there is hybrid schools which have started, and 2 days on, 3 days off. It's going on. But let me ask you, Onika ji, how would you see this? Do you think this is the right time for children to go back to school? We've denied them cognitive education and such important learning process through their most important years. Is it time? Can we do it now?
I think it's high time. You see, sir, because in urban cities like ours, we are comfortable with networking and webinars and seminars and online classes. But imagine the plight of the children who are actually in the rural belt, where the network issues are there, the phones or parents are working, difficult to connect to the school. The holistic development, the growth of the child, somewhere I feel has been stunted. So it's high time that we do our checks and balances. I would not just bluntly say, okay, go ahead, the signal is there for all of us, let's all move into schools. No, we need to have our checks and balances. All schools have to be ready and prepared. We cannot cheat on this issue at all, come what may. So we need to be prepared in terms of our SOPs. Are we ready? Are our children trained? And simultaneously, sir, the parents, they are the ones who need to instill those habits to the children. They have been at home, they have been guided, they have been playing the role of surrogate teachers. The parents, I think, and the teachers have been the frontline warriors during the 1.5 years of COVID that we are seeing. Right. Having said that, Anand, we need the parents to, kind of train the children. We see them taking to the malls, anywhere and everywhere but school. Are they following the SOPs? Are they doing the hand washing or the mask or the sanitizing the hands? These few things have to be instilled by the habits by the parents, and then the school can take over by keeping a check on them.
True, but let me bring in Dr. Sibal and Dr. Shah and ask Dr. Sibal this. This is something which has been my grouse all along, that the disease is the least hurtful to that age group which has been locked up for the longest time. बच्चे तो 1-1.5 दिन में they recover from this. Where there are the least amount of threat. पहले का vaccine नहीं है, बड़े बाहर जाएंगे, then or kids can carriers. Now what is the reason? Isn't it unfair on children?
No, you're absolutely right. Children, fortunately, although say about our NCDC data shows that about 11% of all individuals who had COVID in India are kids, but they make uneventful recoveries. The vast majority of them, some of them will develop MISC less than 1%. But they don't get into ICU, they don't get really sick, but they're the ones who've been stuck at home. And the reason for that is that, they get infected, don't really get symptoms, but pass it on to the adults. And sometimes the adults are very vulnerable in those with comorbidities or grandparents. And that's the reason why now with vaccination having hit 100 crores and, we see that there is a comfort level in allowing these children, with the numbers having come down like they have to less than 15,000. So we've got the numbers down, we've vaccinated. I think the schools more or less have reconciled to the fact that they're going to have protocols in place. Parents are also the vast majority of parents, and I can say that as a pediatrician, the vast majority of parents are now ready to send their children to school. Children themselves, as little as 3 or 4 now, are very comfortable wearing a mask. So I think the timing is right for us to have this discourse, have this dialogue, have a measured response in opening up schools, like has been done in many cities for high schools, and of course, it would then come down to middle school and junior school. Kids have suffered a lot. It's not just about education, but also behavioral issues. We've seen medical issues come up. Like I've never seen as much constipation in my life as I have in the last 1 year. We've seen obesity at levels that are totally unprecedented. There's no exercise routine. They're eating all kinds of things. So it's psychological, it's physical, it's emotional. It's also about education. So all these make for a case for kids to gradually come in. But of course, we have to be cognizant of the fact that this does not mean that we open the floodgates. This also does not mean that we do not revisit. So if we suddenly see the infection rates are going up, the numbers are going up, then we go back to hybrid or go back to virtual. And we have to have the ability to scale up schooling and scale down schooling. And fortunately, as far as virtual goes, everybody now has a fair amount of experience. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. But fingers crossed, great time for us. Vaccination like never before. Imagine we vaccinated twice the population of EU and United Kingdom combined. Truly remarkable. And the numbers are down. So let's start talking about getting kids back onto a normal kind of
True.
life.
But Dr. Sibal, where would you stand? Do you think we've been anyways unfair? Because we don't shut down schools of dengue outbreak. We don't shut down schools for malaria. We've not even taken the cognizance for tuberculosis. But for something like COVID-19, do you think the approach has been wrong? When children are least vulnerable to this disease, we have kept them locked up for the longest time. And how is it fair that all the adults are going out? All the adults are stepping out to do work, but they're still saying don't send them to school. How is this
No,
attitude okay?
No, I think the approach has been fine, and you give very interesting examples. Dengue doesn't spread from a person to person, neither does malaria. So when you have a condition that actually spreads the way it does, like the flu, or for that matter, COVID, a respiratory droplet, or we know that it goes from one person to another, and I don't want to waste time going through how it spreads. It's different. Yes, in some ways it's been very harsh on the kids, but at the same time, imagine if we had started seeing the numbers go up in August and September and schools were open, we would have had a problem. All of us, and then you've covered extensively, and you have hands-on knowledge on what happened in April, and we did not want to go down that route. So vaccination had to scale up, and the logistics. We had to get to that figure of 1 crore a day, and how months ago we said, wow, we're going to really celebrate when we get to that figure. And now that we've had vaccination at that level, I think we are better prepared. And I think, this is the time. I don't think we could have done it earlier. We really didn't want another wave. Fingers crossed about a third wave, but things have started to look up nicely for us.
True. Allow me to bring in Dr. Jinesha. Where do you stand, Dr. Jinesha? Would you agree with me that children have been treated the wrong end of the stick in this entire aspect? We've been trying to be overtly protective about them. When yes, they may have been a spurt in cases earlier, but they are least vulnerable and they would get on and move on. But have we caused significant damage now? And what do you think should be the process? Should we open up schools altogether, or should we still go 2 days on, 3 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off?
Well, thank you, Anand, for bringing me in. I was just hearing to Dr. Sibal as well as Dr. Monica, and your views as well. It's great to be over here in this panel. Now, Anand, I think, like Dr. Sibal mentioned and Dr. Monica also mentioned, when we are talking of children and young people, we have to be aware that it's a very difficult jigsaw. There is no clear answer to this jigsaw, because I think the three main aspects of this jigsaw are, first of all, which is the most important, is the epidemic nature itself, the pandemic nature, the way the pandemic can spread, the way the pandemic can get into a different strain or variant, and how much that can have impact. The second aspect is the psychological impact it is causing to children because of not being in school, being away from mainstream school. And the third aspect, I guess, would be the impact on the intelligence, the cognition levels, the educational impact on the children. So, there won't be any one single answer which will meet all the three jigsaw puzzles over here. by the nature of pandemic, we also have to be aware that the pandemic is yet to be regraded into an epidemic or a disease state. It is still considered a pandemic worldwide. And we don't have an epidemiologist on the panel today, but it's a very complex calculation actually when to understand the nature of a pandemic and when is the right time to degrade it to, or to descale into an epidemic status, or various cycles, various time frames have to be maintained to see the up and down of the strain and its impact before actually safely somebody can say that it's no longer a pandemic. So that is something which we have to be aware that the pandemic is still on. Like you mentioned, and like Dr. Sibbal, Dr. Onik also mentioned, children are definitely, yes, true. Children are least vulnerable, but they're not completely safe. So that is what we have to understand as well. The children are also now going to become slightly more vulnerable, possibly because they are also the unvaccinated, part of the population. I think I'm hoping, obviously I'm not an epidemiologist, but obviously the herd immunity by this time would be in a different place than it was last year. But all these things will need to be taken into consideration very carefully. It has to be looked into to balance the psychological impact, the impact on the learning, as well as
Yeah.
the nature of the pandemic and what dangers the pandemic can bring into this group of population. So like everybody was saying, instead of opening floodgates, a very, very cautious approach in a very time-scaled manner. The one more thing which I think, Anand, we all need to realize is that it is very difficult. I know you say that adults are all allowed to move. See, the asking adults to maintain the social distance, to do the good sanitation practices, to keep very careful vigil on things around them is very different from asking preschool and primary school children to follow. So those things also have to be taken into consideration.
I just quickly want to get in one of the another comment before, because I know Dr. Sabal has limited time with us, and then I'll bring in Onika ji and also come back to you, Dr. Jinesh. But Dr.
Sure,
Sabal,
yeah.
do you believe first to shut down and last to open up? Is that fair? And the collateral damage that children have had mentally, physically, and physiologically.
Well, everybody shut off together, really. So it wasn't that kids were singled out. Yes, but they are the last to get back to some kind of a normalcy, and the reason for that is because they aren't vaccinated, and we had to make sure that adults and the vulnerable population was vaccinated, and we also had to make sure that the numbers were down and the transmission rates were low. So yes, you can turn around and say in many ways it was a bit unfair for kids, and I've seen it firsthand with the number of kids I look after. Yes, it has been, but I guess we had to be very cautious in our approach, and it was about safety first, and then everything else.
Well, Onika ji, but now are schools ready? What should be the way? Should we do 2 days on, 2 days off, staggered mannerisms? How long do you carry on with it? How do you respond to
I don't think so. Hybrid.
an outbreak now? If there are
I don't.
certain cases of COVID.
Sir, you and I have seen epidemics, but children have not seen this kind of pandemic. The scar that we're going to leave behind the mind is going to be very difficult to clear it of the mind. So it's very important now that they should get back to the regular routine of going out, playing, coming to school. But having said that, sir, again, I don't feel hybrid model will work, but we must grade it. The senior children who are more, stronger, if you take in terms of the health issues, the 9th, 11th, and 12th. You see, sir, everything is linked for them, their boards, their career, their entrance exams. So they need to be back first, and then the middle, and then the primary follows. So accordingly, in a graded manner, if we come in, I think things will settle down. What I hear, as education, as a teachers, we're worried about our children that post Diwali and the festivity, where there's pollution and there's so much going on, let it settle down and then the school will begin. That's what I'm being told. So we as school are prepared. We are prepared long back. We have got oxygen concentrators in our medical room. The nurse, the medical practitioner are there round the clock as per the school from 8 to 2. And yeah, sanitizers and the washroom, so on and so forth, wherever we can keep a check and balances. But we need to call the entire school in terms of 9 to 12 first, because we can't have 10 children coming and then the other lot coming. There will be a lot of academic irregularities. So the concept of having the whole school together from 9 to 12, one, and then accordingly. As
But
doctor
but
also
but tell,
said,
but tell me this, Onika ji, why only these measures with kids? In
unfortunately.
offices, say in offices, people are coming back to work. If they are coming back to work, when you're going out into the market and then you're going to shop, if you go to in Delhi, if you go to a Sadar Bazaar, you go to a Chandni Chowk, what is happening there? Kids are going
Sir,
there. Well,
sir, I,
every hotel is packed. People are
sir,
staying there. Aren't you mingling with people? And then, but you want everything to be graded with schools. How is that fair? Your children are exposed anyway when the adults are going. They may be vaccinated, but what makes them not non-carriers?
sir, I've been,
Isn't there danger of the kids being infected like that? Somehow
I
I just
agree,
feel कि
I agree
हमारे fund में कोई
wholehearted.
goal है इसमें. I'm
I agree
sorry, I'm being very
wholeheartedly
very
with
candid
you.
here.
I agree wholeheartedly with you because I've been the one who's been saying this that anywhere and everywhere you see them but school. Is it fair? But sir, please understand, the second wave was very disastrous. Children have seen their nears and dears one actually passing away. So I think the scare was too much. I wish the government was more prepared. I'm sorry, but I need to be very blunt here. The lack of oxygen, I mean, my family members couldn't get placed in the hospital. I've seen deaths. Imagine the plight of the parent who has seen that in the house. Will he or she allow his children to go to school? So that fear was there. Now I feel, sir, it's settling down and parents are they seem eager because they're seeing the loss of a child in terms of the child's holistic growth. It is not just academics, it's not just abcd, it's
Yeah.
beyond that, the peer group, the interpersonal skills, the kind of phobia that the children have developed. All these I feel is a platform where the school can do its bit to bring back normalcy.
So, Dr. Jinesh, let me take this back to you. The psychological impact on the kids, and how is it fair? How is it fair that we tend to penalize the kids when they are the least vulnerable? There has to be somewhere we've not got our approach right.
Yeah, no, it's nice to see you talk about this issue in so much of passion, Anand. But see, we need to be very careful about how we are interpreting things, Like you said, the children are the least vulnerable. I agree with that. But then they are not completely safe. 0.5% or even a 0.3% morbidity or mortality rate in children can actually become very, very devastating for any country, any population, any community. The secondly, children, it's not about the exact morbidity in a particular patient group, but it's about the transmission which that patient group can carry to other members of the family. And lastly, what I would carefully think about, see, it's not very easy to actually juxtapose the situations into an office or into a holiday resort situation. I'll just give you a very small example to explain this. Say, for example, if me, my wife, and my two children, we go to a resort. So we are traveling in a way in which it's the bubble. The four of us who are already sharing the atmosphere and the air and the viruses among us are going over there and staying in a resort, moving around in the tourist place in such a way that mostly this bubble is maintained, going to a place where we are at social distance from other people. So mostly the four people are sharing the viruses and the risk with each other. You see what I mean? Now, same thing will not happen in a school. 30 or 40 children from all different bubbles will be coming into one room, staying into one room for an extended period for many, many hours. Now, those 30 families will be exposed to maybe other 10, 20 families. Do you see what I mean? So it is the actual, that calculation, which is what the pandemic and the epidemiologists do when they recommend
But but
certain issues, certain
but
factors
but
to the
डॉक्टर
government.
जिनेश but डॉक्टर जिनेश एक शादी में आप 200 लोग को अलाउ कर रहे हो. नहीं नहीं, एक शादी में आप 200 लोग को अलाउ कर रहे हो. हाँ, यू आर गोइंग टू कनॉट प्लेस, यू आर गोइंग टू सदर बाजार, यू आर गोइंग टू फोर्ट एरिया, यू आर गोइंग टू द बीच. वहां का aren't you getting exposed to so many people? Children are going to the beach. Children are going to the playground to play. They are going for classes. They're doing all of this is happening. So if all of this is happening, then why are you putting it on the only schools? And you are saying children are carriers. First you said children will be carriers. अब तो वैक्सीन लग गया इसलिए आप ऑफिस जा रहे हो. So aren't you going to be a carrier? Isn't an elder going to be a carrier? Isn't somebody who's into a business going to be a carrier? Aren't they coming into contact with multiple people? Will they not bring the germs home? Are they not going? Aren't you bringing house helps into the house?
That's what I'm trying to say. Everything will have to be in a very calculated manner. Say, if a house help, for example, the example you gave, house help, if the house help is going to 30 odd houses and coming to your house, then that's definitely a very risky situation. Suppose you are going to an office where again there are 40 people sitting in the same 40 square by 40 feet by 40 feet room, like a classroom. Then again it's the same situation. Again, if you are going to a shopping plaza where every family is actually standing within 1 feet of the other family while shopping, then we are in the same situation. Of course, that is why the whole situation that people are explaining so many times that even if you go out, please maintain social distance, please maintain those things. Offices were opened in a very I think the guideline was that start with 50%.
पर मैं आपको वही कह रहा हूँ ना, I know what you're saying.
Things like that.
Dr. Jinesh, I totally agree. But आप देखिए ना, who's following it? You tell me that a 45-year-old person or a 30-year-old person is not going to wear not going to wear the mask on their chin, compared to a child who's going to wear their mask right through because the teacher says it. Okay, in an e-rickshaw, there are 6 people sitting. I can see it right now outside my office. E-rickshaw is going, 6 people are sitting there. What social distancing? Every day it's a different group which is sitting. So all adults, every elder is doing everything, but rules सारे हमने बच्चों के लिए बना रखे. हम घर तो उन्हीं बच्चों के पास जा रहे हैं वापस. But inka psychologically, you're putting the fear of everything in their head. You're denying them the burst and that cognitive learning. You're getting them hooked to a tab or a screen, and you're telling them stay locked in, don't go out. Look at the impact that we are having on that generation, and the damage because of all of this. Is it not going to be far greater than what a COVID could do to the children? That's my question. I may be wrong, but I'm just putting that out there, Dr. Jinesh. Then I'll come to you, Onika ji.
Perfectly right, Anand, because those are the things which I mentioned earlier. We have to balance the 3 stakes: the pandemic stake, the psychological impact of staying at home away from the social setting, as well as the educational impact. And like, see, Dr. Onika mentioned a very, very, very good observation she made, which kind of highlights that the educational stake will be different for different children group. A class 10 student who is having board exams, class 12 student who has got board exams as well as competitive exams to go. All those people will be at a different stage of their life where this much lack of education in a school setting is going to hamper more to them than to other school children. So everything has to be, these 3 things have to be balanced in a very careful manner. Just because a lot of people are not following the normal COVID safety protocols in public places, that doesn't mean that we just open the floodgates for everybody.
Dr. Onika, but how do we manage this? If you can hear me now, how do we manage this? How do we open schools in such a way? Because this is what will happen. I am asking you and putting a point of view where I say that children are being compromised. But tomorrow, if schools open up, and if there is a COVID outbreak, the first thing they will do is they will blame the school. The first thing they will do is shut down schools. The first thing, that reaction is going to be like that. Parents are not going to take a mature point of view saying, ठीक है, 3 दिन बच्चा घर में रहेगा, 5 दिन घर पे क्वारंटीन होगा, उसके बाद बच्चा is all right, finish, over. Everybody gets back to school because they recover faster. And then also the pressure of how many days do you do online and how many days do you offline. Imagine the teachers what's going through them. Imagine the parents what's going through them. Imagine what the children are going through. It's a big cycle.
Do you remember we had the NEET examination? First wave. So much of halla gulla happened. Everything is on my fingertips. I remember everything was happened. But the children. Anyways, NEET happened, a lot of halla gulla came and it's wrong, we should close it. We did. We went to the NEET examination with 12 children in a class and we managed it. But then, the second wave was very disastrous. I still feel nobody wanted to take the blame game. Schools would have been ready, but some would not have been ready. Parents are going out, getting COVID to the house, it's okay. But if a third person is a victim of it, it would have been, as you rightly said, the schools would have been squarely blamed for it. So hence, I think even the school community, the teachers also played it, they played it low, that okay, we are going online, we are going slow, never mind, we'll wait. Now that it has died down, now that we're seeing the second wave and the apprehension of the third wave coming is not much visible, though we are still fighting with the invisible enemy. But still then I feel now that it's settled down, we're not getting cases, we can now get back to school with full force, but again in a graded manner. Within a month or 2, we'll know the reactions. The moment we see that no, it's not hampering either ways, we can then get back. That is why I've been repeatedly saying we must have it in a graded form. As Dr. Jinesh said, we can't have floodgates opening. Let's have it in a graded format, but we must have it now. Enough experiment, enough of testing, things have been done. on the poor children. Vaccination was a very slow drive. People didn't want to get vaccinated. Government had to send messages to get it done. So much of apprehension about getting vaccination. So hence, if they are not vaccinated, how can we expect the children to come back? It's a long procedure, but it's been almost 2 years now. New session is going to begin. Boards were conducted online. I mean, they were not conducted, sorry, this time. They had too much of juggling with the marks. Children were not satisfied with the marks. They were like, they had come down the grades. This term also, sir, Anand, sir, CBSE is having a midterm exam through them, so that there's no disparity. There's kind of nobody can say we have cheated on them or something. So CBSE, keeping that in mind, what if the school is not open? What if the children don't go to school? What if children fall sick? So they are prepared from their end in terms of the academics. So our school, that in case the schools don't open, are we ready for examination? What kind of examination is going to come? So we are worried on those parameters also. It is not just opening of the school, it is also how to bring them to a normal education pattern where we had one-to-one interaction, where there was chalk and talk, so it's no longer that. So a lot
Right.
of worries are there. We are working on those aspects as to the examination, because that's foremost to assess them. We have been assessing them in our own ways and means. The CBS has streamlined it, and it's going to be a nice format where everybody will be at par. So, not only just opening of the school, the academic aspect as well as the children's own personality factors are also being considered. That is why, sir,
True.
the new education policy, the NEP 2020, is also talking about the skill-based, no longer rote learning, no longer examination. So coming session, we will see the national education policy almost in full force, wherein we as teachers are also being trained by CBSE regularly, so that God forbid, if this happens, are we prepared for our children
Hmm.
whom we least bothered about?
No, point is the if this pandemic, and I continue to say that if this pandemic was attacking children, then we should have protected them the most. But
Yeah.
if the adult population is the most vulnerable to this, then why are we overprotecting our children? And what is the psychological impact of what we are doing as a country? Is something that we need to consider. My final question to Dr. Jinesh, and then we'll wind up this conversation, because now people will say, बड़ों को लगा दिया, बच्चों को टीका लगाओ, बच्चों की vaccination आएगी. After I get my children vaccinated, I'll send. By that time, somebody will say, booster लगाया नहीं है, जब तक booster नहीं आएगा, तब तक I won't send. So this is a never-ending cycle. Then you'll always remain in apprehension. How long can you be like that?
And that's the interesting aspect. See, we are feeding more fears and anxiety into us by even having, these kind of anxiety discussions among the parents and everything. And you're completely correct. And that is why it's very important for us to realize that there is definitely a group of experts, a huge group of experts who are epidemiologists, who are pandemic experts, and who also are giving directions from very sound government bodies within the India as well as internationally. So that is also something to be followed very carefully. Now, one thing you have to realize that, yes, exactly, a lot of parents are also in limbo to whether this is the right time to send children to school, because there is no clear guideline. The pandemic has not yet been degraded. The immunization status of children remains still very, very questionable. We have to look at the other countries also where the schools had opened, especially in the Western countries, and actually the COVID rates in children actually rose in those countries after the schools did open. But see, their infrastructure, health infrastructure is very different from our health infrastructure. Of course, government has in the last few months really worked hard to prepare for children if they become vulnerable in the pandemic. But still, we are very far from par. So that also has to be taken into consideration. I completely agree with you that a lot of, like I said earlier as well, on all the three fronts, psychological front, education front, as well as the pandemic front, these three things are part of this jigsaw, and at no place will they all meet in ideal. And we have to be very careful. The very interestingly, very recently, the advertisement which comes out on the media and the television is about कि कोविड का हाथी तो पास हो गया है, लेकिन पूंछ अभी भी बाकी है. अभी भी हमें पेशेंस, अभी भी सेफ्टी, हमें अभी भी धीरज रखना है. The problem with pandemic is that when we start losing patience, that is when the surges come, which is exactly what happened in the second wave. With the last Diwali and everything was felt as if everything has gone okay. Let's start moving out. Let's start do a lot of tourist things and everything. And then the second surge came. So very careful, very slow, in a very graded manner, like, Dr. Ronika mentioned, like Dr. Sibal mentioned, a very graded manner, with groups of children coming out, testing it out, especially those where education is at high stake. And then, see, one thing, Anand, you have to realize that if we force any parent into a situation which they are not very happy with, and then something untoward happens, then the psychological impact becomes very, very high on that family. I'll give you an example. Some schools gave the option that yes, because the fear is low now, but the danger has not gone. So if you feel you are safe, then you can send your child to school. But otherwise, if you don't, then we will start online as well. Although we are going to do all the safety precautions in school, the sanitization, the disinfectant. But if you feel, we will continue both online as well as offline for the time being, because we know that the pandemic is still there. So the risk has not completely gone. See, that is a more calculated, more open approach for the parents. So the parents can then make an informed decision that where do I stand? Whether I'm happy to send or not. But there were certain schools where there were certain, especially some, some co-curricular activities, for example, some dance classes or karate classes, something like that, sports center, where they said, sorry, no, we are now opening it completely only offline, and we are not going to provide any online provision at all. In those cases, will be having no choice. So out of kind of a fear of compulsion, they might send the child to the school, although the fear is in the background. Now, if something happens in that situation, then that parent and that child will have a lot more psychological impact than the parent who made an informed, just decision. So that is why we have to realize that the status, anxiety status in every child family will be different. Every child family will have a different circumstance. You don't know. Some family may have more elderly people at home than the other family. Some family may be living in such a situation that although school is sanitized, but sending from home to school is going to become a very risk factor in the way the child will be going and coming. It all depends on very different situations. Dr. Ronika mentioned, like, rural people will have completely different ball game in terms of online education because they are suffering the most. So everything has to happen in a very close, calculated manner, remembering the thing that the pandemic is not yet over. It is not yet degraded. It is not changed. Immunization status is also still going on. So keeping those in mind, with proper safety protocols, with proper informed choices to families and parents, it has to be done.
I agree with all of this. No, I agree with all of this, but this should apply to everybody. It can't apply only to children. That's my grouse. My grouse is my larger grouse with society and with India is especially all of us, and I'm including myself in this, is that we apply everything to children, but it is applied to them, but it's not applicable to us. And in fact, we are more vulnerable than children are. We have to follow these protocols far more than kids have to. But the adults themselves don't want to follow it. But they say, बच्चे follow करेंगे. मैं वैक्सीन नहीं लगाऊंगा, बच्चे लगाएंगे. मैं मास्क नहीं पहनूंगा, बच्चे पहनेंगे. मैं सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग नहीं रखूंगा, मेरे दोस्तों के साथ तो चलेगा, बट मेरे बच्चों को रखना चाहिए. मेरा ऑफिस खुलना चाहिए क्योंकि मुझे ऑफिस जाना है, बट मेरे बच्चों का स्कूल बंद रखो क्योंकि उनको I am afraid of them. So this is something which
completely
is also something that we need to wonder that what is applicable to us is applicable to our children too, and what we want to apply to our children, we should also follow, especially in this case of the pandemic. Great conversation, wonderful speaking to all of you, Dr. Sipal, Dr. Shah, and also Anika ji. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to having far many more conversations like this going forward. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.